Dear student, welcome to our program, Knowledge Quest. The subject is biology, and I'm your teacher, Lydia Asiago. In our previous lesson, we were discussing the process of digestion, and so far, we've discussed from the beginning to the end of the process of digestion, whereby we said the process of digestion starts in the mouth and ends in the ileum. Now, as we talk about the process of digestion, the question is, what are the end products of digestion? We said that the carbohydrates, they are completely broken down to glucose. The proteins, they are also completely broken down to amino acids. Then lastly, we said that we have the lipids, which are broken down to fatty acids and glycerol. Now, remember we said that the process of digestion ends in the ileum. And if you have been following the whole discussion, you realize that I said the ileum has two functions. The ileum has two functions. Function number one, it completes the process of digestion. It completes the process of digestion, which we discussed in our previous lesson. And function number two of the ileum, it does what we call absorption. Absorption of the end products of digestion. Absorption of the end products of digestion. So we are saying that the process of digestion ends in the ileum. That's why we are saying that the one function of the ileum is to complete the process of digestion. And number two, after the food has been completely broken down, we expect absorption of the end products to take place. Now, the question is, how does the ileum qualify to do the two functions? So we want to discuss on adaptations of the ileum, to its function. What is the function of the ileum? Number one is digestion and absorption. So, how is the ileum adapted to its function? That is the question. How is the ileum adapted to its function? Now that it has two functions, completes the process of digestion and absorbs or absorption of the end products of digestion. For it to do the two functions, you realize that there are many features that the ileum has, and in this case, I'm going to divide my way of reasoning into two because we are talking about the adaptation. So we are going to see which feature does the ileum has that makes it suitable to perform the two functions, and then we see the function of that feature. The function of that feature. Like now, number one, we said that earlier on we said that the ileum is the largest part of this small intestine or of the digestive system. And because of that, you realize that the ileum is highly coiled. So the first special feature we say is that the ileum is highly coiled. Number one is to increase the large surface area, So we say increase the large surface area for digestion and absorption. It is highly coiled to increase the large surface area that is required during the process of digestion and absorption. That is the first feature of the ileum that makes it suitable to do the two functions. The ileum is also very long. It is very long. And why do you think it is long? It also does the same function. It is long to increase the large surface area for absorption and digestion of the food substances. Number three, you realize that the highly coiled also slows down, we say it slows down the movement of the food substances, and because of that, it gives it more time to end the process of digestion, and then absorption will take place. So the highly coiling, apart from increasing the large surface area, it also slows down the movement of the food substances such that it gives it more time for the process of digestion and absorption to end. Feature number 4, you realize that the ileum has what we call the villi and the microvilli. The villi and the microvilli, they also increase the large surface area for digestion and absorption. So we are saying that there are structures along the ileum that we call the villi and the microvilli, and their work is also to increase the large surface area so that the process of digestion can complete, and also absorption of the food substances, the end products of digestion, can take place. Now, number 5, another feature that we find in the ileum is that there is a dense network of blood. Dense network of blood capillaries. And the work of the dense network of blood capillaries, this is where the food substances they are absorbed into, because it is in the blood that they are transported to various parts of the body. So there is a dense network of blood capillaries so as to provide service for absorptions. So that is, they are going to transport the digested food products. Then number 6, there is also a structure by the name, the lacteal. And you realize that we said that we have end products of digestion whereby we have glucose, amino acids, fatty acids, and glycerol. So you realize that the glucose and the amino acids, they are absorbed directly into the blood capillaries. The glucose and amino acids, they are directly absorbed into the blood capillaries. But you realize that the fatty acids and the glycerol, they are absorbed into the lacteal. So the moment they are absorbed into the lacteal, the lacteal drain them into the lymphatic system, which later will join into the blood system. Now, there are various features that we can mention about the ileum, but so far we can work with the one we have mentioned on the board, that for the ileum to do the two roles, that is digestion and absorption, it is highly coiled, it is long, there is numerous villi. We have the villi and the microvilli. We have blood capillaries into which the glucose and the amino acids are absorbed, and we also have the lacteal, which absorbs the fatty acids and glycerol. Now, you realize also that we have a thin epithelium. We have a thin epithelial cells. Thin means that they reduce the distance of diffusion. Remember that the process of absorption can either take place by diffusion or by active transport. So basically these are the features of the ileum that enable it to perform the two functions, that is, complete the process of digestion and absorbs the end products of digestion. Now, because we have discussed how digestion takes place, so we want to see what happens during absorption. What happens during absorption? And what is this that is being absorbed? Remember we said it is the end products of digestion. So which are these end products of digestion? We said we have glucose. We have glucose. We have amino acids. And we have fatty acids, and glycerol. Now, when I talk about absorption, what do I refer? Absorption refers to the process whereby the soluble products, now we call this one soluble products of digestion, they diffuse into the cellular lining of the villi. They diffuse into the cellular lining of the villi. Remember we say that when you were discussing the adaptation, we say that the ileum has numerous villi. There are villi and microvilli, which increase the large surface area for absorption. So you realize that the moment the glucose diffuses into the bloodstream, because we are saying that absorption, we want to see the end products being moving from the ileum all the way to the bloodstream, because it is in the bloodstream that we are going to transport them to various parts of the body. But you realize that the glucose and the amino acids, the moment they are absorbed or they reach the bloodstream, they are drained into the hepatic portal vein, hepatic portal vein, which is a blood vessel that transports substances or nutrients or blood from the stomach to the liver. So there is something that we want to take note of. There is something that we want to take note of, that immediately after absorption, the glucose and the amino acids, they must be transported to the liver before they circulate the whole body system. Then we ask ourselves, why should they be transported first to the liver before they join the whole body system, the transporting system, all parts of the body? There are two reasons, or there are many reasons, but I'm going to mention two. Now, you realize there's something special, because we are saying that something must happen, glucose and amino acids, before they reach all parts of the body. They must pass through the liver. Now, what do we know about glucose? Maybe I can start from there. What do we know about glucose? Number one, glucose is osmotically active. Osmotically active. So what does that mean? It raises the osmotic pressure within the body fluids. And if you are very keen, there is a time we were discussing about osmoregulation, that for cells to function properly, they need a constant environment. Otherwise, if the osmotic pressure is high within the cells, remember we say that the cells will draw in water, they will swell, they will burst. So what will happen? Remember, a cell is a basic structural and functional unit of a living organism. So if a cell burst or cells burst, then it means they are not performing their role. And without a cell, you cannot form an organism. So we are saying that because glucose is osmotically active, it increases the osmotic pressure within the blood fluid or within the body fluids, such as blood and the tissue fluid. And because of that, there is a normal level into which we are supposed to have glucose in the blood system. So we should not have, so there is the norm. There is the norm. The normal amount of glucose that is required in the body system. And of course, who does this? If you are very keen, if you have been following the series that we've been learning, there is a time that we discussed that we have a part in the brain that is known as the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is the one that senses that there is a high osmotic pressure. The level of glucose in the blood is high. So when the level of glucose in the blood is high, that is high above the norm, what happens? Remember we said it will send an impulse to the liver. Does it send an impulse to the liver? No, first we said it sends an impulse to the pancreas, which will release the insulin. If you remember, very keen, insulin. And we say that insulin has more than two roles. What did we say? We say that insulin, number one, stimulates the liver cells to convert excess glucose into glycogen. The glycogen will be stored in the liver. Some of it can be stored in the muscle tissues. Remember, I'm explaining why immediately after absorption, glucose must pass through the liver before it joins the other blood system, before it joins the other parts of the body. Why should it pass through the liver? That is why we are saying that immediately after glucose is absorbed, it gets all the way to the hepatic portal vein. And hepatic portal vein is the vessel that transports blood from the stomach to the liver. So what happens? We said that because we know that glucose is osmotically active, it may raise the osmotic pressure within the body fluids. We must have a given amount within the body. And that given amount is what I was referring to as the norm. So there is the norm. And now the question is, and especially immediately when someone, after someone has taken food and then immediately after absorption, we expect the level of glucose to go high above the norm. And that is the time that the hypothalamus, that is the part in the brain, will send an impulse to the pancreas to release a hormone by the name insulin. Then once insulin is released, it is released, of course, into the bloodstream, then transported to the liver. Then the work of insulin, number one, will stimulate the liver cells to convert the excess glucose into glycogen. Then the glycogen will be stored in the liver. Some of it can be stored in the muscle tissue. That is one way we are seeing the role of the liver, why glucose must pass through the liver. Number two, you realize that insulin will increase the rate of oxidation, such that in case there is excess glucose, some of the excess glucose will be converted into energy. It will be oxidized, broken down to give us energy. And thirdly, you realize that insulin will also convert some of the excess glucose into fats. Some of them will be converted into fats. Then the fats will be stored in the skin tissue, especially at the adipose tissue. Adipose tissue. Remember, I'm just explaining why immediately after absorption, glucose must pass through the liver before it joins the whole blood stream. So I hope you are now seeing or you are understanding why glucose must pass through the liver, so that the excess can be regulated. We don't need excess, because anything above, remember, glucose is osmotically active, so we need the normal range of glucose in the blood. Otherwise, if glucose just flows directly into the whole body system, then it means the osmotic pressure is going to be high within the cells. And of course, we know what will happen to the cells. We are just going for a short commercial break. Stay tuned. We'll be back. Dear student, welcome back to our program, Knowledge Quest. The subject is biology. And before we went for a short break, we were discussing on the functions of the ileum and how the ileum is structurally adapted to its function. If you remember very well, we said that the ileum is long. Those are just the features. It is long, it is highly coiled, it has numerous blood capillaries, it has the villi and the microvilli, and also we say that there is the lacteal. Those are the features of the ileum that makes it suitable to do the two functions of digestion, completing the process of digestion and absorbing the end products of digestion. Now, what were our end products of digestion? Our end products of digestion, we say that we have glucose from the carbohydrates, breakdown of the carbohydrates. We have the amino acids from the breakdown of the proteins. We have the fatty acids and glycerol from the breakdown of lipids. And we said that during absorption, after digestion, we have absorption. and we say that absorption is the process whereby the end products of digestion, they diffuse into the cellular lining of the villi. And of course, we said that there is something that we noted, that as much as they diffuse and then finally get into the bloodstream, there is something that is very keen that we need to take note of. Number one, we say that the glucose and amino acids, before they join the whole blood system, they must pass through the liver. They must pass through the liver. And I have explained why glucose must pass through the liver. We said that glucose is osmotically active and it increases the osmotic pressure within the body fluids. So we must have a constant level, a given level of glucose in the blood. And that's why we say that we must have the norm. The norm, in that case, I refer to a given constant, such that we take note, we don't go beyond the norm or we don't go below the norm. And that's why we said that, and especially when we have absorbed glucose into the blood system, the level of glucose definitely goes high. The part of the brain known as the hypothalamus will sense the high level of glucose, and it will send an impulse to the pancreas, which will release the insulin. Then insulin will stimulate the liver cells to convert excess glucose into glycogen. That glycogen can be stored in the liver or in the muscle tissues. So remember, we are dealing with what will happen to the excess, because immediately after absorption, there is excess glucose. So excess can be converted to glycogen. Some of it can be converted to glycogen, stored in the liver, and then some of it can be stored in the muscle tissue. Then we said that some of the excess glucose can be converted to fats, then stored in adipose tissue beneath the skin. And then you realize that insulin also increases the rate of oxidation. What does that mean? It means that the rate at which glucose is broken down to give us energy, it increases. So this is a process that we had discussed when we were discussing the role of the liver in osmoregulation, that is in Form 2 work. Now, why else should the amino acids, why should the amino acids also pass through the liver before they join the whole blood system? I hope now you've understood why the glucose must pass through the liver. So the other question is, why? Why? So the second NB, why the what? The amino acids also must pass through the liver. There is something that we learned in our previous lesson, that our body does not have a mechanism of storing excess amino acids. Our body does not have a mechanism of storing excess amino acids. And because of that, the liver is able to regulate the amount of amino acids that we need in the body through the process we call deamination. And I think we had discussed this process of deamination, but in a while I may have to repeat for those students who missed that. So we are saying that after absorption, glucose, amino acids, they are absorbed into the bloodstream, but first they pass through the liver. That is, from the stomach to the liver, there is a blood vessel by the name hepatic portal vein that will drain or transport that from the stomach to the liver. Then what happens to the fatty acids and glycerol? These ones, from the basic knowledge that we have, fatty acids and glycerol are end products of breaking down the lipids. And we know that the lipids include the fats and oils. But now, for animals, this is where we find the fats. Animals. Then the oils, we find them in plants. So I want you to pick this one. So, what do we know about fats? Because immediately the fatty acids and glycerol, they are absorbed into the lacteal. They are absorbed into the lacteal. And I said that in the lacteal drains into the lymphatic system. Then from the lymphatic system, we expect it to drain into the bloodstream. But something happens when the fatty acids and glycerol, they are absorbed into the lacteal. They combine with some fat-soluble vitamins, and they make them at least soluble. That's why I'm saying that what do we know about fats? We know that fats are insoluble. Basically, that is the one key feature I want to pick. Fats are insoluble. So what do you think will happen if the fats were directly, because the moment the fatty acids and glycerol, they get into the blood, into the body system after the absorption, they reconstitute back to the lipids, which now in this case we are talking about fats. And we know that fats are insoluble. Then probably, because they are insoluble, transporting them to various parts of the body will be difficult. And at times, these fats may clog the blood vessels. So it may hinder the transport of the blood in the blood system. Now, that's why we are saying that the fatty acids and glycerol, they are absorbed into the lacteal. Now, these are the end products of digestion and how they are absorbed. So we have a question. Does it mean it's only the end products of digestion that are absorbed? Does it mean it's only the end products of digestion that are absorbed? Do we only eat the fats? Do we only eat the carbohydrates and the proteins? No. There are other food substances that we eat, some of which are not digested. Like now, we have vitamins. We have mineral salts. These are vitamins, mineral salts, we find them in the food substance that we eat. These substances, they are not digested, but they are directly absorbed into the bloodstream. They are simple, they are not digested. Vitamins, so we have examples of vitamins. We have vitamin K, vitamin B, vitamin A, vitamin K. There are so many, which we find them in the food that we eat. So these vitamins, they are not digested, but they are absorbed into the bloodstream, then of course transported to various parts of the body. The mineral salts that we eat, where do we also find them? In the food substances that we eat. For example, we have sodium ions. We have sodium ions. We have potassium ions. We have potassium ions. We have calcium ions. All these are mineral ions or salts that we find in our food substances that we also absorb into our body, our bloodstream, without digesting them. So in a way, apart from the end products of digestion, we have those two that are very special. Then we have the glucose, we have the amino acids. These were digested. We have fatty acids and glycerol. So these are also in their own category because these one are digested. These are digested. These are not digested. They are directly absorbed into the bloodstream. Now, there is also something else that we take that we may not classify as food, but is very necessary in our nutrition or in our diet, something that we call water. Now, we know that water is life. Yes, we can say water is life, because without water, take an example, your blood, 80% of the blood plasma is water. So without that water. So water has so many roles that we have in the body that we may not classify it in the classes of food, but it is necessary in our diet. Water acts as a solvent. Water provides a medium of transport. Because these substances, they dissolve in the water that is in the blood plasma, then they are transported to various parts of the body. Water activates enzymes. So there are many functions, or there are many roles of water that we can mention. We may not mention all the functions of water, but water is also necessary in our diet. Remember, as we wind up the process of digestion, it is good that we understand that apart from breaking down the complex food substances, there are other nutrients, or there are other substances that are also key in our digestive system. Now, there is somebody, I'm calling it somebody by the name roughage, because it is part of the diet that we take, but so far in the process of digestion, I have not mentioned the word roughage, but I want to mention roughage. That roughage is very, very essential in our diet. Now, where do we find this roughage from? Mostly we find it in the, if we feed on plants, I believe that we know that plants, each organism, any living organism is made up of a cell. And you realize that a plant cell is made up of what we call a cell wall. And this cell wall is made up of a substance by the name cellulose. Now, what is this cellulose? Cellulose is an example of a carbohydrate under the class of polysaccharides. Cellulose is a carbohydrate, a polysaccharide carbohydrate that is stored in the cell wall of plant cells. And you realize that when we feed on plants which has the cell wall made up of the cellulose, that's why we say plants, they have a cellulose cell wall. So you find that most of the roughage comes from the cellulose that we have in plants. Now, basically, we don't have enzymes. As human beings, we don't have enzymes that can break down the cellulose. Of course, in this case, we expect which enzyme can break down the cellulose? Definitely cellulase. But you realize that human beings, we don't have the enzyme cellulase that can digest the cellulose in the plant cell wall. But we still need that cellulose. Now, the question is, why do we need the roughage, which mostly is contributed by the cellulose? It is because, number one, we say roughage, it adds bulk to the food. Adds bulk to the food. There is something that we don't have to forget. We said that Along the digestive system, food moves by the process known as peristalsis. Peristalsis. And peristalsis takes place whereby the circular and longitudinal muscles of the digestive system, they contract and relax antagonistically, that is oppositely. When the longitudinal muscles contract, the circular muscles relax. So when they contract and relax, remember, for movement to take place, muscles must contract and relax. So you realize that as food is moving along the digestive system through the process of peristalsis, you realize that the roughage, they add bulk to the food. So what happens? The food moves very fast. Unlike someone who eats food that has no roughage. If you take food that doesn't have roughage, what happens? Mostly when you take refined food, they take long to move along the digestive system. So what does that mean? The process of digestion is slow because there is sluggish movement of food along the digestive system. And that one may end up to constipation. So you hear someone saying, I have constipation. Why? We are taking food that is refined. We are not taking roughage because we need a roughage to add bulk to the food so that it can ease the process of peristalsis. So that's another component that we need in our diet, apart from the vitamins, the minerals, and the end products of digestion, together with water. So if you are very keen for you to understand the whole process of digestion, number one, you must understand what is this that is being digested. Do we only take food that is digested? No. We also take others that are not digested, but they are necessary in our diet. Like now, some soluble vitamins, they can be absorbed even in the stomach. Not even in the ileum. Some of them can be digested, can be absorbed in the stomach. So we need to be very keen. But you realize that for the mineral salts, this one, for the mineral salts, mostly they are absorbed in the large intestine. Large intestine. They are absorbed in the large intestine. So we are saying some soluble vitamins, some water-soluble vitamins, they can be absorbed together with water in the stomach because they don't need what? Digestion. But the end products of digestion, they are absorbed in the ileum. The mineral salts, which we also take in our diet, they are absorbed in the large intestine, that is in the colon. But you also realize that some part of the digestive system has no role, like now the appendix, it doesn't take part in the digestive system, but they constitute the digestive system. Now, what happens? Do we only take food that is digested? Do we only take food that all of it can be digested? That is the question I want us to answer. We have taken food that is not digested. We have taken substances that are not digested, but they are essential in our diet. We have taken substances that are digested and they have been absorbed. Now the question is, do we only take that is digested or indigested? No. After digestion has completed, absorption has taken place, what happens? Whatever that remains, whatever that is indigested, whatever that was undigested, so in this case we have two situations. We have that is indigested, indigestible, it cannot be digested. we have that was to be digested, but it was not digested. Where do all those substances go? Of course, they come out of the what? Of the rectum. They come out of the rectum as a waste. They are not digested. They cannot be digested. They were to be digested, but they were not digested. So, at that case, we expect a process known as digestion. So, in this case, we talk about digestion to take place. So, digestion means whatever that was not digested, whatever that was to be digested, but it was not digested. And at times we eat what is not cannot be digested, something like stones. We can find stones in our diet. We don't have enzymes that can break down stones. So all that comes out, and that process we call it digestion. So remember, we started by the process of ingestion. And now we are ending by the process of digestion. I hope my students you've been following. That is the end of digestion. That is the end of absorption. But to finish on that, when we do the absorption, the glucose has been absorbed into the bloodstream. It has been regulated. We have the norm. What happens? The amino acids, we have enough. We have what is required in the body. What happens to them? So as we wind up the whole process, allow me to mention what we call assimilation. As we wind up the whole process, allow me to mention what we call assimilation. Assimilation. Assimilation means those end products of digestion, those whatever that has been absorbed into the bloodstream, how is it used? I start with glucose. Number one, we say that glucose is the main respiratory substrate. Is the main respiratory substrate. So what does that mean? It is used in oxidation. It is the one that gives us energy. And of course, we said the other time that excess glucose is converted to fats and stored in a adipose tissue that is beneath the skin. Some of the excess glucose is converted to glycogen, which is stored in the liver. That is about glucose. Yes, it has been transported to various parts of the body. That is how it is used. Number two, how is the amino acids used in the body? The amino acids, of course, they are used to synthesize the proteins. They synthesize the proteins. Remember, you need proteins in your body, and we have several uses of proteins in our body. Number one, we talk about for you to grow, you need proteins. Proteins are necessary because they take part in repairing the worn out tissues. And lastly, what happens to fatty acids and glycerol? Of course, we also said that they also reconstitute, they form the fats. Most of the fats, of course, we find them beneath the skin in a layer we call the adipose tissue. And the main role of the fats is to insulate the body against heat loss. Heat loss. The main function, they insulate the body against heat loss. But of course, you realize that when the glucose, during respiration, when the glucose substrates, they are depleted, we can use the fats. So fats can also be oxidized to give us energy. Then, of course, we say once we deplete even the fats during starvation, the amino acids can also be used to give us energy. That is during starvation. So they can give us energy during starvation. So basically, my student, that is what we've been learning about digestion. So at least you've seen that the food we take into our system, it has to be digested, it has to be absorbed, and at the end of the day, we must see the use of the product of digestion, or you must see the use of the substances that you've absorbed into your body. I have been your teacher, Madam Lydia. Remember, this is our program, Knowledge Quest. Always get tuned, for you will learn more.